Today on Paul's Old Crap, I'm going to talk a little bit about my Power Macintosh G3 desktop and the Power Mac G4 tower I have here. This is considered an old world system, and this is the new world. It has to do with how the ROM works and the general architecture of the systems. But for this video, I'm going to be talking about macOS 9 and which of these systems I prefer to use macOS 9 on. Now, I'm fairly old school Mac fan, so Beige systems like this one, this is kind of what I like to use for retro computing, but the G4 tower does give me a lot of power for macOS 9, and I do prefer this as opposed to the older G3 system for a number of reasons. And well, I'll hopefully cover that and give you my opinions on why the G4 tower would be a better choice for macOS 9 than the older G3. So let's take a look at the back of the units. You will notice that I do have a number of expansion cards, but let's first talk about the stock ports that you get. On the G3 system, you do have a lot of the standard ports that you would find on older Macintoshes from before the G3. So you've got your 25-pin SCSI over there. We've got your ADB down here. Ethernet, fairly standard. I think this is just a 100 megabit Ethernet. Then we do have our two serial ports for modems and printers. Your old standard Mac video port. And this one does have the older basic soundboard. There is another version of the card for this computer that has like AV input and outputs and stuff, but this is just the speaker and microphone port. There also is a slot for modem, which this model does not have, but I mean that's not really a big deal. And then you do have 3 PCI expansion slots, and I have one populated with a USB card. Now, if we look at the G4 tower, we do have USB already included, and we do also have FireWire ports. Now, this is something, well, USB and FireWire you can add to the G3, but it is nice having it on board for the G4, although I do wish it did have more USB ports. One of my ports here is actually broken, so I only have one functioning port. It's kind of annoying, but anyway, we do have onboard Ethernet, of course, and this is the gigabit Ethernet model, so you get pretty good network speeds there. This one does have an onboard modem, but I mean, that's who needs that nowadays, right? And then I do have the speaker and microphone ports here. So, in terms of the difference between these systems for ports you might need, the G4 tower, it would be nice to have external SCSI for compatibility with some of your older devices. Now, this is something you can add to the system, so I mean it's not that bad. I do have at the bottom here, this isn't a 25-pin SCSI, this is a 50-pin SCSI port, but yeah, any older SCSI devices that I have, I can get the corresponding cable and connect them to this if I really wanted to. Now, there is one thing that the G4 would be missing, and that is serial plugs. So if you were needing compatibility with the G4 and, let's say, older printers or something that didn't use USB, then what you need to do is get some sort of adapter kit which converts USB to serial. Just so happens I have one of those here. So it's basically just plug it into USB, and it gives you 2 serial ports on there. I'm not too sure how long I've actually owned this. I don't even remember where I got it from, but yeah, this is if you needed to do serial devices on your G4, and yeah, all you've got is USB. When it comes to keyboard and mouse, I do prefer using the USB over the ADB. Mainly because I really don't like the original ADB mice, and you know, not being optical. So when you've got USB components for your keyboard and mouse, typically your mouse will be an optical mouse, and you do have a variety of keyboards that you can use. So I do prefer that. Now, I do have a USB card in this computer, so if I really wanted to, I could, I guess, use a keyboard and mouse for that, but I'm not entirely sure how an old world system would handle USB because the driver wouldn't load until the operating system is fully booted, I believe. So if you still needed to enter a keystroke before the system boots, you'd need to use an ADB keyboard for that. I suspect it wouldn't have USB support in the actual ROM, so even though it's got the USB add-on, I don't think that would actually work until the drivers load within the macOS. I could be wrong, but that's what I suspect. So having the system like this, where you've got kind of like that hardware support for keyboard and mouse through USB automatically, I do prefer that. If we look at the FireWire and the lack of FireWire on the G3 system, now that's something that might not affect a lot of people. If you do have FireWire accessories, hard drives or whatnot, certainly you can add a FireWire card to the G3. It's just a standard PCI expansion card. But that's probably not going to be a deal breaker for most people. While FireWire is nice, I think USB has kind of taken over as the more popular type of connection. I myself have only one device in my entire house that actually uses FireWire, and it's kind of annoying to use because most modern PCs don't have FireWire, so I have to use expansion cards to deal with that. So, I mean, USB is probably the one thing you're going to be looking for, and FireWire is just kind of like support for any older devices that did come with FireWire from around this era, but I don't think you'd find a whole lot of that nowadays, I don't think. Now, if you want to talk about ease of expansion for the systems in terms of getting the computers apart, the G4 is the clear winner of that. There, you're already inside. This is probably one of the easiest machines I've ever had to work on. So, yeah, basically the whole thing just folds right out, gives you access to the inside. RAM is right here. Processor, if you were replacing that, that's not really a big deal for me. You've got your AGP slot, and then you do have 3 PCI slots back here. And it does actually support full-size PCI cards. So this long card that we have here, this is a full-size PCI card. It goes right to the end of the case, and that's actually a Korg audio card. So it's nice that it fits in here, and also this card does fit in the G3. I was actually running that card in this system back when this was one of my daily drivers. But if you take a look at this, now this system isn't too bad, and a lot of people have said that, you know, this is a lot better design than some of the other Macintoshes from before this, but you gotta like push in these little things underneath, but yeah, be careful because this plastic is real easy to break apart. So the lid comes off, then what you have to do is, I don't know, like weirdly push this around until it pops out, and then that folds out. Then you have these 2 things there that snap in, then this folds out, but then you also have to take this little piece and put it there so it locks in, and then hope all of it just nicely sits there without like folding completely over and falling apart. But I mean, this isn't terribly bad, but I don't like having to rely so much on these plastic bits, because I do have a PowerMax 7200, which is the same form factor, and all of the plastic has just completely broken. So it really makes me worry when I'm working on that system. But I mean, it gives you easy access, so we do have hard drive right at the bottom here. You've got your RAM sticks here. I think we also have the L2 cache stick. And there's a memory chip in here. I think this is the video memory because it is expandable on this system. This one in particular does have 6 megabytes of video RAM. I believe the onboard or the default amount that it comes from the factory is maybe 2 megabytes. So it does have expanded video memory on this one already, which is, you know, not bad. And then we've got the custom slot for the, I think they call this the personality card or something like that. And then we've got our PCI slots right at the back there. So the cables for this kind of route upward in here in a little weird way. I don't know what happened. Oh yes, you gotta like hold that up a bit. Really? Alright. I think it's closed. And then this. Okay, stay there. Okay. And this is like line up the bottom, I guess, and then well, I think that did it. So the G3 it's not bad compared to some of these other computers I've got behind here, but for getting into the system and replacing components or whatever, the G4 I like a lot better than the G3 system. So inside the G4, we've got our hard drive storage area near the bottom here. Primary hard drive fits in right in here, and it does look like you can even put 2 more hard drives in here. These like plates, you unscrew them and they've got holes that appear like they would line up with the bottom of a hard drive. For this system I've only really got needs for 1, and I've been experimenting with a ATA to SATA device here and trying newer hard drives, and it seems to be working out pretty good. I'm playing around with drives that aren't old and horrible. So this system will support and boot off some SATA drives that I've found so far. So this definitely is a plus for this system. Gives you a lot more options for storage. I will note though that I believe macOS 9 using the HFS extended, or whatever the file system is technically called, I think you have a size limit per partition of 127 gigabytes. So having the largest hard drive isn't really going to matter too much. The main thing I'm looking for is the ability to use newer hard drives for reliability purposes. So yeah, getting rid of the older ATA hard drives, which are probably starting to fail by now, and using newer SATA-based drives. That's definitely a plus for this system. I suspect the same thing should work in the G3 desktop. This is basically just, yeah, an ATA to SATA converter, so I don't imagine it would work much differently in the G3, which also uses ATA for its internal hard drive. Now when we're looking at the front here, you do have one bay for your CD-ROM drive or DVD, and you've got a 3.5 bay below it. Typically these units did come with a zip drive. This is not the original one that came with this unit, and I don't have the proper cover plate for it. So it does have a kind of like a module that you could pull out, and it's got the 5¼ inch full-size bay for the optical, and then you've got your 3.5 inch for zip or whatever. And it does support, so this is not the original drive as well. This is a DVD rewritable drive that I got out of one of my PC towers. This is not an Apple drive, but it does work just fine in here. I needed to put a burner in this device so I could burn some toast images, and Yeah, the original drive that was in here was just a standard DVD reader. So PC DVD burner does work just fine, and this is also just an ATA zip drive. So both of these are ATA based, which is a bit different from the G3, and we'll get to that momentarily. So for the expansion options on the G3 system, we do have two open bays here. These require that you have the little plastic tray piece thing that screws to the bottom of like your hard drive or whatever, and it just kind of like snaps in place here. Typically you would find a zip drive down in this one. That's assuming you don't have a blank plate on your cover. So this would in some of these units you would have a zip drive that would be found here, and that would be for this bay here. And somehow it's kind of annoying the way this works, because the opening is right around here, which translates to around right up here, whereas the zip drive that I have mounts way down here. I think it's a special sort of tray that it sat on in order to go into this bay and line up with the opening that would have come on one of these things with the zip drive. I don't know, I have that piece that was on this unit, but my zip drive I couldn't make it line up. So that, I don't know, that was just super annoying, which is why it's now empty here. But then it does have this one up here as well for, I guess, if you want to put a second hard drive in. Because underneath this tray, as we saw earlier, you do just have the one spot for the hard drive that's down in there. And you will also have to run an ATA cable up here somewhere. There isn't one that's already run here, so I don't know. I'm assuming this board has two ports for it. One other thing I didn't mention before, floppy drive. The G4 Tower does not have a floppy drive, whereas the G3 desktop does. Now, I think for most people that's not really a big deal, but if you are looking for something that can write software to floppy drives, for even older computers, like if you have computers like an old Mac without internet, and you needed to get some software from an internet-based Mac over to it, and disks are the only way, the G3 desktop does have that, which is a plus, although at the same time you probably could just get a floppy drive for your G4 Tower with USB. It might just be more convenient doing it with an internal drive. I'm not too sure about the compatibility with USB drives and, let's say, 800K disks, but if you're just using like 1.4 meg disks, it's probably not a big deal. But one of the things I want to bring up though, the CD-ROM drive on the G3 desktop is a SCSI drive, not ATA. You can tell because it's got the giant cable here. This is annoying for me because I have a shortage of good SCSI optical drives, and this is just a standard CD-ROM. This originally would have come with a 24 speed. That's not what this is, because I don't even know where my SCSI drives are. I don't have enough of them. And I don't have any SCSI CD burners or any SCSI DVDs. So when it comes to the optical media, the G4 Tower does this better for me, because I can just throw in a standard PC-based drive, whereas I don't really have any good SCSI drives going around, and all of my old Macs, they're all using them up. So yeah, that's one thing you might want to keep an eye out for if you're working on these old G3 systems. The SCSI stuff might be a little harder to come by. There's one last consideration, and that's basically your preference on the actual form factor. Now, the monitor that I use when I'm doing work on any of these old computers, it's that monitor right there. Now, I'm not going to lift that monitor up and place this unit underneath it every time I want to use this computer. And it being a desktop, it's kind of annoying. I don't want to like prop it up on its side because it's not completely like flat down here. You've got like these parts right down in here that kind of stick out a bit, and it wasn't made obviously to stand upright like that. However, the G4 tower, even though I was never really a fan of this being a tower, it does work out great now because I can just kind of have it sitting way over here, kind of out of the way of my main work area, and have the keyboard and mouse here. Whereas this thing, no matter where I put it on my table, it's still kind of in the way. So yeah, I find that the G4 Tower form factor, it is preferable over the desktop. Now, in terms of retro computing appeal, I do like this sort of machine better, but if you were looking for like an OS 9 daily driver, probably want to go with a tower. So, in conclusion, it is my opinion that the New World system is a better computer for doing macOS 9 kind of as a daily driver than the Old World systems. Now, obviously, this is not anywhere near the fastest available macOS 9 machine. This is only a 400 megahertz G4. You can get G4s up in like the dual processor and crazy specs. But at the same time, one of the considerations that I had was something that didn't really suck down power, and it was also fairly quiet. And I find that the noise between these systems, I think, is pretty close to being the same. I'm not overly bothered at all by the fan noise in either of these systems. So that's definitely one of the things I was considering. You can obviously go with something that's a lot faster than this and has a lot better specs, but this system, I do have 512 megabytes of RAM. The ATI AGP video card that's in there, I believe, is a 16 megabyte card. So for like basic gaming purposes, I mean, it should do the job. This one, I think it's an onboard Rage 2C, if I'm not mistaken, with the 6 megabytes of video memory, whereas this is the, I think it's the Rage 128, I believe. So, I mean, if you're doing macOS 9 gaming, one of these older systems, probably not the best thing to use unless you're running games that were released around the same time. You do have a lot more options with the tower here, especially when you do have the AGP slot. So, I mean, you can put PCI video cards in the Beige system here, but if you're looking for actual game performance, that might not be the best idea compared to getting one of these. So, between these two systems, I would highly recommend the tower here. And I'm not really going to get into too much about the newer versions of these towers. Like you can get like the mirror drive model, and I don't even remember what they've got. But yeah, I don't want anything too crazy. I want something that doesn't take too much power and doesn't generate too much noise. So yeah, I kind of prefer this one for macOS 9. But I don't know. That's just what my preference is, and there you have it. So thanks for watching.